Eamon Dillon. Today we're going to be talking about three brothers who have come to be known as the Ferrari Fugitives and their recent run-in with the Irish Criminal Assets Bureau. Who are these men and how have they become accustomed to such a lavish lifestyle?
These are an interesting story. They always catch the eye of journalists like me who haunt the courts looking for good stories. So this, I suppose, in a sense, has everything in terms of these guys just love flashing their cash. So you've David, Jonathan, and Joshua Cartu, and they were Canadian-born brothers who became Israeli citizens. They're wanted internationally for operating probably what was one of the biggest boiler room scams in the world. They basically took about 186 million euro from their various victims before they finally were shut down. They emigrated to Israel from Ontario. They used to hang out with all the elites in Tel Aviv. I think one of them went out with a woman who had previously gone out with Benjamin Netanyahu's son. So they were in the golden circle. They had set up their offices probably in the top address in Tel Aviv at the time, and then moved to bigger premises as their scam got bigger and bigger.
You mentioned that they are Canadian born. What do we know about their background in Canada?
Well, the dad was a car salesman. The mother died when they were quite young. And so you had Joshua was the oldest brother. And he started out he got a job in Cyprus for basically an online gambling company and kind of learned about how that business works and then developed his own software for his own company and undercut his bosses and then continued to pick up other work doing that. He then moved on to a company in the US based in Panama. But again, he was basing himself out of Israel at this stage, and again he was running these online casinos, but they had a terrible reputation, and they kind of explained to their customers who were expecting their jackpot wins that weren't coming up. And they were saying, look, there's a glitch in the software, and they'd make promises to fix it. And of course, they never did. He was pocketing the money, diverting the cash into his own accounts. So, I mean, he was I suppose the only kind way of putting it was that they were unregulated. Their governance wasn't good, or really what they were at was out and out deception and fraud.
Why the name the Ferrari Fugitives?
Well, this was Toronto Life magazine did a big profile on the brothers in 2022, and I suppose that's the name they gave them because it was all based on Josh's his Instagram. He talked about the best part of the day is choosing what Ferrari you're going to drive. He had 12 of them at this stage. He entered the Gumball Rally one time with two Ferraris and a Rolls Royce, and his father drove one of them, and one of the brothers drove the other one. This is $75,000 entry fee to enter the Gumball. So it was all part of this, life of the super rich, and it was used as well to attract investors into his schemes as well. That you too can be rich like me, and he kind of, I suppose, spew out some of these, life only gets what you owe it and things, these kind of meaningless aphorisms or whatever that these guys come up with as if he was kind of put himself across as some kind of financial guru. And that would have been all fed into this image. But he certainly wasn't shy about flashing the cash, from everything from private jets to exotic holidays and trips taking a trip on a fighter jets to break the sound barrier, things like that.
Okay. So Instagram is the shop front of sorts to kind of lure people in. What were they lured into?
Yeah, well, I suppose what people thought they were doing was they were getting involved with a financial company that was offering what was called binary options, which is, I suppose, if you break it down, it's either wrong or right, it's on or off, or lose or win. So you're basically gambling on something that it's going to go up or down. So I mean, I remember reading stories years ago about financial brokers in London would go for a boozy lunch, but they'd put £100 bet on whether the price of oil would have gone up or down before they get back, and then whoever lost would pay for the lunch. So it's literally it's really high risk. You're kind of, unless you're right in the middle of the markets and really are an expert and know what you're doing, you're just gonna lose money. It's highly risky, but they put this across as if this was a genuine option. I mean, they were eventually banned in Israel, and it's just binary options are just associated with fraud now at this stage. And what they did was, they had quite sophisticated software. So like the customer facing software, people would log into it and they'd see their investments going up, their bets going up. And of course, everything was fine until they went to try to get their money out. But in the meantime, they were also getting hammered on the phone by people saying, look, you're doing really well. And if you add another 7,000 or 10,000 or 50,000, you'll be part of the Premier Club. And you're going to, so they had all these various scams to get people to pour more money in. So you had all sorts of people, not necessarily very wealthy people, but people who were using their pension investments in the States were taking it out of their 401ks, I think they're called in the US, and they were kind of hoping that they would be able to top up their retirement funds with this money, but lost literally everything.
And now they're making headlines in Ireland, having come under the radar of the Criminal Assets Bureau. How did this happen?
Well, I suppose it's one end of one of their tentacles. Like, I mean, it was such a sophisticated scam. They had, layers and layers of companies registered in different jurisdictions, from all sorts of countries, the different tax havens like the US Virgin Islands and, the Caribbean, Bermuda, places like that, but also in Ireland as well. And they were very much... there was so much money sloshing around. They would have employed people who wouldn't necessarily initially have known that they were working for what was essentially a criminal operation. They would have thought that this was a genuine, a genuine financial company, and people were brought in as coders, or they were brought in to deal with customer care and this sort of thing, and thought they were working in a normal environment until, of course, there were some of these stories about some of the Irish crew being brought out on a staff weekend in Berlin where 25,000 was paid in entertainment in a strip joint, and people were given sort of 3 rounds of Johnny Walker Blue Label whiskey. So there was all this sort of excess that would occasionally probably should have given people cause for concern, which I think it did. A lot of people would have left. There's certainly one person mentioned in the cab case who was working as a coder for this man called Octa Sarper, who the case was actually focused on. And when Sarper had told him that the guards had searched his apartment, he just left. He realised that he wasn't involved in a legitimate company, and he did the right thing and walked away from it. So I mean, what happened was recently in the High Court under the Proceeds of Crime Act, they were the Criminal Assets Bureau were targeting this apartment in Swords and I think €340,000 that was left in a bank account. And as part of that, the Criminal Assets Bureau will go through the belief evidence about why they believe this was criminal proceeds. So that's why they were bringing in the Cartu brothers. So we had Michael Gubbins, the detective superintendent, the chief officer of CAB. He described them as notorious fraudsters who operated boiler room frauds out of Israel using companies, some of which were Irish. The cash from bogus investor schemes is then laundered through Irish registered firms, including one of them called Greyback Mountain, which was a key company in their whole setup, in that they used that to process the credit card payments that were coming in. And so there was kind of, I suppose in a way, a central involvement in Ireland, probably by accident to some extent, why it was based here. But it was... It was by the time the Irish authorities were getting onto it in 2017, the Cartu brothers knew the game was up. There was, they were going to ban the trade in binary options in Israel, and they were trying to wind down the companies. And one of them went into the High Court to try and wind down Grey Mountain at that stage as well. So, I suppose we got an insight with the CAB evidence from the High Court case just a couple of weeks ago. And it gave an insight into how complex the investigation was and how difficult, and so many different companies were being used, registered under names using third parties, so that the Cartu brothers wouldn't be directly linked to it. Mm-hmm. So it was extremely, I suppose, how would you say, opaque, the whole thing was, and deliberately so. And the fact that they were moving money between various jurisdictions and to different entities, set up in all over the world. So
Ireland was one of many countries. There was nothing, lax or lenient about the way we do things here that allowed them to operate out of Ireland.
And one of the things they were careful about, that they didn't target people for this fraud in Ireland or Israel, because they knew like they were the two countries where it was key to kind of keep their nose clean, and they very much stayed away from that. I suppose Ireland would have been always a good place for genuine or legitimate financial companies, services companies, to be based here. So in a way, they were hiding in plain sight. So it's a it was a clever move on their part. I mean, they were getting great tax deal in Israel, because I think new immigrants get tax breaks for the first 10 years they're operating there. So presumably they were probably looking at various tax regimes that they could exploit in Ireland, as well as a new company being set up. Now the thing was that Grey Mountain as well was processing financial payments, but didn't have a license to do so. So and the fact that they stayed away from Irish customers meant it was never flagged with the authorities, which is why they were able to operate for as long as they did.
Tell me more about Octa Sarper.
He's a Cypriot, a Turkish Cypriot citizen, and he at one point was studying pharmaceutical engineering in UCD back in the mid-noughties, and he was linked to a guy called Jonathan Zarfati, or he was also known as Jonathan French, and he was a guy who's been kind of widely linked to the Cartu brothers as kind of one of their front men. When the guards they seized Sarper's phone in 2019, and they found Zarfati's number stored in it, as well as WhatsApp and Signal conversations between the two men. So that kind of very much solidified the evidence in the cab's point of view that Sarper was essentially working for the same organisation that headed by the Cartus. Sarper they carried out searches on his different devices, including his laptop, and he did searches such as transferring criminal property and money laundering charges Ireland. And so, and the analysis also found that he travelled extensively, between 2018 and 2019 to places like Istanbul, Munich, Bulgaria, Malta, Oslo, and so on, Warsaw, where apparently he's living now, Cyprus, Vienna, London, and lots of other places. So he had a firm called Octavex Limited, which is also found to be carrying out financial services. They're not being authorised to do so by the central bank, and had to be told that by his lawyers. And he had a legitimate solicitor firm who had done some conveyancing for him. And they realised then that he had actually used their letterhead to fake documents and forged the signature of one of the members of that firm. Of course, they had absolutely no idea that this was going on. And when he asked, he wanted to sell this apartment he'd bought in Swords for 210,000, which Cab said, 192,000 of that was from unexplained sources. Now, he told his solicitors that this was a gift from his parents, and he wanted to get the money back to them without having to pay tax. And they told him that, you can't do that. That was illegal. So, I mean, when they kind of went through it with Cab, they kind of pointed out that, if he was... his actions, as far as they're concerned, and this is all given in sworn evidence in High Court, that he was, that his actions constitute deception, money laundering, and the unlawful use of a computer was one of these kind of criminal offences that they singled out as well. And this, of course, was all part of the belief evidence to kind of persuade the judge that this money that was in the bank account and the apartment in Swords were the proceeds of crime. And that's why they were looking for what's called a Section 2 order, which is have them declared the proceeds of crime, which then eventually they'll get the power of attorney over that, and then the apartment will obviously be sold on the market and the money will be returned to the Exchequer. Because one of the interesting things was there was 2.24 million moved through this account that they said Sarper controlled, and there's 360 odd thousand left, but only 130,000 could they actually link to victims, because they were going through, all they had really to go on was some of the bank information, and there wasn't enough information for the simple reason that some of the payments had been layered through so many different companies. They couldn't find the original person who lodged that money into Grey Mountain or into one of the schemes. And then they said they also they had some information about people who were victims, and from open source information, obviously just Googling social media. So they're sending messages to people saying, "Hi, I'm Detective Eamon Dillon from the Criminal Assets Bureau. We believe you've been defrauded." So people just thought this was another scam.
Yes.
And they said as much in evidence. So it was another difficulty they had in giving it back. So they've only been able to return €130,000. They've identified €135,000 of that money. But, but there's 2.24 in total. So it was a fraction really of what was there, and a third of what was finally frozen in the account.
The brothers' lavish lifestyle is also part of the cab evidence. Can you take me through some of the more colourful
Yeah, well, I
instances?
suppose we talked about the gumball race and
Yes.
and the Ferraris and things like that. And again, he was. I think Josh was hanging out with Robert De Niro on the set of The Irishman, or well, he certainly blagged his way onto the
Yes.
onto the set. Joe Pesci and people like that. But this is all about, like I said, it was all about this kind of trying to. Trying to portray this super rich, wonderful, like idyllic existence.
So, Eamon, investment scams in general are rife right now. But yeah, well, when I hear these stories and I hear about this being promoted on Instagram by somebody on a private jet, as much as I sympathise with the victims, I do have to say, doesn't a logical, rational-minded person sort of look at this and know immediately that we're dealing with a scam?
I would think so. I mean, but like I suppose, I cover criminal access bureau cases all the time. You write about money all the time for the Indo. So, some people they don't think about getting into investments until they have, say, some money put aside or get an inheritance, and it's the first time they've ever decided, oh, let's get into something, and they see this and they go, wow, why isn't everyone doing this? Maybe this is a great idea. And these boiler rooms are really high pressure sales techniques that are used. I mean, to call it unethical is an understatement. I mean, it's outright criminal behavior. I mean, I don't know if you saw the movie The Wolf of Wall Street, which is very much what the Cartu brothers were at. I mean, they were selling bogus products essentially, and you were playing in a fixed game because they controlled all the software. So even if you won, you didn't win. So I mean, even if your bet did work out, they kept the money. So and then they were looking for more and more and more investment off people all the time until they'd squeeze you dry. And there's Judge Michael Toomey. There's a long judgment about the case involving Greyback Mountain, and he actually starts it with there's a very poignant email, and it's from one of these investors, and it was sent to the person who was registered as the administrator of the company here in Ireland. And it was, can anybody help me with withdrawing the €210,000 and wire it to my account? See attachment. Please understand that my life has become unbearable. Daily I'm having stress. I can't believe this is happening. These were all my savings from myself and my children. Please proof me that this is all not a scam. And that's the human face of corporate fraud.
Yeah. Finally, Eamon, how much of an impact has the Criminal Assets Bureau had since its inception in 1996?
Well, this is something we've discussed a lot on the Crime World podcast, but it's had a huge effect. I mean, there was people like Bomber Kavanagh who left in the mid '90s. There was people like the man they called Johnny Cash, John Morrissey, again, who left in the mid '90s. These and these are all people now that have been shown to high level members of the Kinnan cartel. I mean, it's very difficult to keep your money here unless you have a good explanation for it. John Gilligan, I suppose he ended up in prison before he could move his assets, but even before that, he was trying to launder his money by placing bets on every horse in a race and had somebody in a bookie office pretending that he had a winning docket and this kind of stuff. So it was a very kind of crude level. So that doesn't work now. You see some of the cases, recently you'd have local drug dealers, people might have an unexplained $250,000, and they've never worked a day in their life, and they're kind of claiming they get it from Boyle Sports or from Paddy Power and all the rest, and they're able to go and get all the financial information from these betting companies and show that initially there was 210,000 of unexplained money went in, so it has to come from somewhere. So the clever guys just get it out now, and I mean it's what separates the serious criminals from the really serious criminals, is being able to get your money out of the country to some place where you can actually enjoy it, like Dubai. But otherwise, I mean, it's very hard to hide your money.
Eamon Dillon, thank you so much.
That was a pleasure.